Hey y'all, it's Kara Phoebe. Welcome to the Roundtable. This time around, we're talking about Get Out. I'm here with
Neve B. I am a performer, writer, and disability justice activist.
Dorian Taylor, local adaptive athlete and problem solver.
So what was y'all's reaction when you first saw the trailer? What did you think about the movie?
So confessions, I actually never saw the trailer. I don't have access to pop culture. I was just told multiple times I need to see this movie.
Oh. And then we saw it together. When I saw the trailer, I have a tendency to kind of binge watch trailers for horror movies on YouTube. So one will tell me to watch like 5 more. Mm-hmm. And at first I thought that it was like a horrible blaxploitation film of the modern era. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what to think. I was very scared. And I have a very specific trigger that is, I guess, specific to a lot of Black people, which is just like seeing Black men feeling victimized is like a knife to my soul. And I just can't deal. And so I really had no idea what to think, and I really thought that it was going to be scary, and I didn't think that I didn't know who made it. So then when I did further research and understood who it was by and why it was, then I was excited and wanted to see it. Yeah. But I think at first I definitely was like, this is going to be gross.
Yeah. I definitely saw the trailer knowing about Jordan Peele, being a huge fan of Key and Peele. And I felt mostly just like excited at the idea of this person who had laced such a good analysis of Black culture and the subtleties of Black culture into his comedy. Like what he was going to do with a mass market horror film.
That's interesting because what made me want to see the film was an article that someone wrote about Get Out being a comfortable space for Black men to be scared. And as a Black masculine center of person, where my fear when I'm sobbing, people call the cops on me. That's what propelled me to see the film, was the having a space for Black men and Black masculine people to be scared, to be the ones who are actually afraid for once.
So how did that compare for your experience seeing it for the first time? I saw it in Brooklyn, in New York, in the middle of the night on Sunday of opening weekend. So I definitely saw it with a lot of people that were determined to see it on opening weekend, which is usually a contingency of like movie addicts and people who feel really drawn to the film. So the theater was mostly Black, and the rest of the people that were non-Black were like artist types and movie addict types who were there for what the film was doing. And I had the good fortune of literally sitting next to somebody who was like, this Black masculine person who had the best commentary I've ever had on a film in my life. Literally at the point when the fucking girlfriend got like killed, he shouted at the top of his lungs, "That's what you get for like separating your Fruit Loops from your cereal and your milk, you nasty bitch!" And like it was so good. It was such a good thing for me because I was like, sitting in my seat like balled up and crying and so scared.
White shit.
And it just like, it was like the perfect injection of like Black humor that I like needed to like break the tension that first time seeing it when I was just like overwhelmed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The first time that I saw it with Dorian and another friend of ours, and I knew that the first time that I saw it, it had to not be with white people. So, like, my partner is white, and my partner is out of town, and I was like, I'm gonna see Get Out while you're gone. I'm just gonna, like...
I was waiting for my white partner, too.
I was like, I'm gonna screen it for whether or not it is possible for us to watch together without me hating you.
Real.
And while you're away, I'm just gonna like hug all my stuffed animals and like watch the door
and pretend you don't exist.
Yeah, like, good thing I'm here. And you're fortress, you know.
Truth.
So he was like, I respect that, and you should, yeah, you know, if I need to see it on my own, I'll do that, and whatever, you can let me know. So Dorian and I saw it, and we were hands clenched the whole time.
My hands were like this, actually.
Yeah.
Everyone was holding on.
Yeah.
I was in the middle, clutching my two friends like this.
I'd already seen it when you saw it, so it was like, yeah.
I felt nauseous the whole time.
Definitely.
I was really surprised by, like, you know, I'm a disabled person and a dancer, so I'm pretty, like, somatically aware of myself, but I was really surprised by how physically and emotionally exhausted I felt after watching the film. And it had so many things that I liked. Like, it had so many horror tropes that I liked. It had such beautiful editing and camera
stunning.
work. Yeah, it was really beautiful. And it was very exciting and fun as a film for me to watch, and also extremely heartbreaking and frightening. And so I had a very split reaction after watching it, where I, on the one hand, wanted to watch it immediately again.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, felt like nauseous and exhausted, and really just like a lot had been taken out of me.
Yeah.
I also appreciated that, like, despite the fact that we were in Seattle, there was definitely like contingents of like Black and brown crews who had come to like talk during that film. And it was really fun to have back and forth and to have people like appreciating each other's senses of humors and like, you know, getting with each other. And
you know, it was actually a good segue to my experience. So I saw the movie twice. The second time was with Neve, but the first time, not only was I the only person of color in the movie theater, I was the only Black person in the movie theater. I had to leave, I missed about 30 minutes of the movie the first time, leaving the theater to take breaks. The second time I took a break, I was just so, floored by the fact that I was the only person reacting to certain, like, literally, people would be laughing at microaggressions and I would be scared. People would be scared at things that I was like, that's just a Black man running. You know.
I mean, when he's walking in the
van, when they very first get to and he runs, and everybody was, and so that was my first introduction. I went back in the theater, and we're towards the end of the film, and this white lady comes up to me and literally tells me that I am being too loud because she is trying to process the film. And I looked at her because I was scared. I was trembling. It was one of the scariest parts in the film for me personally with my history. And then having that happen, and the first thing I snapped at her, and I was like, do you know what it's like to be a person paralyzed by police violence and who has only dated white women in a theater like this? Go away. And that's like literally is all I could tell her. But I was trembling the rest of the movie, and when it ended, I sobbed until the lights went bright and the theater was empty. And then my friend could help me out of the theater.
Yeah, I think that there's a way that the audience reception and the way that people like see different parts of it is so much of the like cultural read of this film. Because I definitely have talked about it with people where I'm like, the part that really freaked me out about like the gardener running is that like those were the moments where I'm like, this is not how a Black man would act.
Yes.
And like those were the moments I started getting really scared, like, and feeling like the fear I would feel as like a young Black femme in these white affluent spaces, and when the one other Black person in the room ends up having bought into the things that are like hurting me and oppressing me, and I'm reaching out to try and be like, oh hi, I see you, you're here, I'm here, and they're kind of like, why are you dressed so weird? Why do you have tattoos? You should put on a suit and go have a normal job.
The second time I saw the film, I was able to sit in theater without leaving. So I actually missed like 30 minutes of the movie. And I remember like the maid not knowing what a snitch was, and I went to I went to prison in the 90s, and I went to prison on a drug-related crime in the 90s, and so a black woman, what I perceived to be my age, not knowing what a snitch was, and then I was like, oh shit, you don't know what a snitch is? Like, I literally just like, and I was by myself, and I was like, oh shit, she doesn't know what a snitch is, and this person looked at me and was like, mm-hmm.
That was the really interesting way that they layer in the whole mind control thing, and the understanding of like genuine cultural differences that I think a lot of white people take for granted because of the way that black culture gets appropriated into white pop culture. Yeah. Like, I think there are things in language and blackness that they don't understand are rooted in history.
It's dangerous. As a person who's... I'm first generation out of Jim Crow on both sides with two black parents, but I'm perceived as biracial. Right. And so there are a lot of things that are come from a cultural appropriation, but at this point, people my age think are American culture. This is what we come up with in American, like a banjo, for example.
But that's
which is the prime example of cultural appropriation. I always use the banjo because it was created by African slaves in Haiti, and the first time it was used in the United States was in minstrel shows. And I literally used to get in fights growing up trying to tell white people that black people created the banjo, because cultural appropriation is such a thing. Like, people don't think that it matters, but it's like what is used to teach black Americans that we don't have our own culture. We try to force ourselves into thinking that we're Americans, but we're black Americans. We have our own culture and it's separate.
I would say actually that I feel like a film has not spoken so deeply to me about minstrelsy since Bamboozled specifically. Yeah. And like Bamboozled is one of my favorite movies. Yeah. And yet it's this movie that like when I'm like, let's just watch Bamboozled casually, people are like, that's not, I don't know.
Videotape.
Yeah. And I mean, I love it. And I also, but I like an intense experience, I guess. But I just feel like, I think that what people really don't understand, I think cultural appropriation is this watered down term. And people don't understand that what we're talking about is minstrelsy, because what we're talking about is taking something completely out of its context. Right. Because like when a white person says snitch, or when a white person says popo, or when a white person says hood, or when a white person, I mean, just whatever. Yeah, or like makes their voice sound different. Yeah. You know, that is funny. And we're specifically talking about like white people using that shit as like a humorous tool.
And it's interesting. Sorry.
I was gonna say, this movie just like so perfectly shows that is all connected to genuine KKK level racism, which so many white people, it's the only thing they acknowledge as racism. Right. Like when you are willing to use and put on blackness as this cool thing, like it's all connected. And I feel like this movie does an amazing job of indicting that, because it shows all these different people being like, oh, I want to be black because it makes me cool at sports, or it makes me able to run, or it makes me pretty, or it makes me like all the different reasons these people want to put on
good at sex.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, are still racist reasons to want to modify someone else's racial experience, including having that Asian man in there asking about like, oh, is it easier or harder to be a black man? It's like, well, of course it's harder. Yeah. Just because you've now commodified it and you think it's interesting. And I doesn't make my life easy.
I feel like cultural appropriation is also something that white people think is something that is in the past.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm so grateful for this movie and what Jordan Peele was saying in that one interview about
why it's important.
Just being about calling out the colorblind lie.
And there's no such thing.
And there's no such thing.
Post-racial.
And that, we are not post-racial. Like, one black president does not make us post-racial.
And I also feel like he also, maybe he didn't realize he was like, talking about the vulnerability of black women, but I felt it was really important for him to show that, like, black women are strong, but, like, this woman was queer and, like, was sucked into that, like, she didn't have that, like, the family, the sense of belonging that was used to take the main character into the sunken place was his mother. And that her that lack of family, and that is something that as like black queer people we often get alienated from that family and the sense of community that black people have that white folks in America don't have, because like I feel like it's up to us to keep our families together, and so black people like have that. That's just something we have, like families, everything. And I feel like I don't know if that was something, because that's never mentioned in any of the interviews or any of the.
I think it's one of those things that comes with any really good art, is that you accidentally make up points in the completion of the project that you weren't planning on, just because you are talking well and broadly about complex subjects. So you end up making points, I think, sometimes that are necessary and important, that just come from the way that things are.
And she was also the only one that didn't seem to be completely lost. She was the only one that seemed to be struggling, that seemed to be trying to communicate something. And I felt like it was speaking to not just the strength of black women, but the strength that people believe black women are perceived to have. Like I feel like oftentimes when I'm perceived still as a woman, and oftentimes when I'm reaching out for help, the first thing people say was like, "Well, you're the strongest person I know, so if you're reaching out for help, what am I to do?" And I'm like, "Okay, yay, I'm about to crack, so and like, it's
so real,
right?" And so there were so many layers of what Jordan Peele brought out with that movie.
The other thing about that scene and that character specifically is also that that was, I don't know, I saw it a second time with my partner, and I was like prepared, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna be really upset, like I'm probably not gonna like take care of you too much, but I'm just gonna like watch your face and like see what your reactions are. Just like the whole time, I'm just gonna be like doing this. And there were like some other like amazing noisy black femmes in the audience we were going back and forth. There was a white dude who was sitting in the center of the room alone, who like at one point without looking at me was just like, "Can you not talk right now?" And like wouldn't look directly at me, but was talking to me.
Nope.
And I just kept like looking straight ahead, and I was like, "Did he just tell me to stop talking?" And then I just like kept talking for the rest of the movie. And the thing is that he was so Seattle that he didn't say anything to me for the rest of the movie. So I was like, "That's what I thought." I'm gonna just keep commenting on this film that I'm enjoying right now. Thank you very much. But the scene where I don't even know, because no one really has their real names, so I don't know how to even refer to those characters.
I just refer to the gardener and the maid, or I call them the mother and the father, because I get really... Because it's really what's happening. Yeah.
Right, and that's the purpose of the movie. They were stolen, and that's who they were.
So I missed that part when I peed in the first time we saw it, but the second time I saw that part, and that is when I, like, sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, is when she just said, like, "No.
That's not my experience.
No, and, like, streaming.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot to be said about my hopes and feelings and fears. But especially with this movie, I think it's going to bring a subtlety back to American horror that has not been here. Because just that shot of her face as she's like fighting and sifting through emotions was genuinely one of the most uncomfortable things I've had to witness in film. And like it was a beautifully shot moment. It was so well crafted, but it was about the subtlety of the pain in her eyes.
In the beginning, when they were talking about the father, the grandfather, and his athletic career, I'm an adaptive athlete. I have experiences with the fact that people don't believe my story of police brutality, and didn't believe it until I became an athlete, and the fact that Black Americans' athleticism is literally based on slavery and the fact that we were bred like cattle. And the fact that we were bred like animals and we were bred on our athletic prowess. And I feel like that's something that people just forget about. And also in this movie, what you mentioned, I don't think he meant to bring ableism into the film. Because horror movies, like we mentioned, horror movies often depict disabled folks as the villain, but he was just another white person in the movie, you know, trying to grab something that black folks had. And when you were looking at this blind person, you really saw it as him grabbing his artistic eye.
Right.
But he was grabbing his eyes, you know, and not just his artistic eyes. It was more than that to me.
I felt like what really hit me about seeing that blind white man who was able to capitalize on the logic of the rest of the white people. I felt like it was interesting that it was sort of saying that he had less of a racist stake in it, even though that's definitely not true, because he was like, oh, I don't even really care about what color you are, I just want the things you see with.
And
the thing for me that I thought was really interesting, and I think was the thing that I think it was actually like a perfect indictment of the entire like systemic oppressive world we live in with that character, was that it was like, it doesn't matter what he tells himself, he still thinks this person is worthy of being bought for his own desires.
Right, and for me,
and that's such an interesting indictment where it's like, no matter your intersections, if you still can look at this black person and see them as a commodity that you can just take.
Right. But then the other part was that I felt like I was like, then like the potentially really insightful intersectional piece is that a disabled man can still be racist.
Right. And
so I was like, okay.
That's what I saw.
Cool.
And I saw that not only could a disabled man still be racist, he was also speaking to the fact that he didn't have the same privilege as all the other white people.
At the same time, was trying to connect with them about their intersectionality.
He was disabled, So there was... right. It was like, bing, 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 And I also feel like he was one of the most famous white characters in the movie. Yeah. Because as someone who is not as inundated with pop culture, he was one of the only characters in the movie that I recognized. And I thought that was really important because to me, he was one of the most important characters in the movie. Because not just because of how it was played out in the movie, but because of all these nuances that the character brought up. He was speaking on all these different intersections, and like you said, I don't know if that was all intentional.
I also thought that it was like very strange and interesting because speaking to the ways that he was the one person who was actually able to connect with Chris, who was white in that space.
Who shared experiences of oppression and discrimination.
But in addition to that, I felt like that was really like a light on for me in realizing that black people have never been but have never had the permission to be alive in society and physically disabled. Yes. Like being black and being physically disabled is not allowed. You can be potentially viewed as mentally disabled, although probably not disabled as a solidarity term. But to me, the way that black people get subjugated as crazy, as predatory, as simple-minded, as all these things is a kind of ableism.
Yeah. I mean,
it's yes, but it just like was so strange that I was like, oh, like this other layer of ableism that I've always experienced throughout my life is also racism.
Yeah. It's also racism.
And what you were saying was very true. Like, I mean, it was my perceived mental disability, which I've had my entire life, is how I acquired my physical disability, and with racism, and how it's all intertwined.
Yeah, it's why people don't believe my fluctuating ability.
Right.
They just don't believe it, because, like, most of the time, I'm strong, I'm fine, and when I'm not, people don't that a black person's abilities can fluctuate.
And even with me, and I'm a person with a physical disability and a chronic illness who's also a world-class athlete, so people see me as good disabled.
And me being a dancer.
Dancer. And so like, they're like, oh, you just like, you you race all over the world. You exercise more than anybody I know, but it's fine. But I'm like, but I'm still, you know, I still have lupus. I still have autism. I'm still crazy. Like, don't get it twisted.
The moment when I was like, oh shit, this movie is going to be so much more than I thought it was actually in the first like scene of the black guy walking alone on his phone, because that was like, that has been me on so many occasions, and having that car like slow pull up behind me. That has happened to me with strangers, it's happened to me with cops, it's happened with unmarked cars, where I'm just walking alone and I'm suddenly just like, I have no idea how this is about to pan out. I don't know what's about to happen to me. And like having that like not today and like walking home has happened, and so just to like see it come to like the most terrifying fruition. I was like in the fetal position in my chair, just like, well, we going in on this movie.
It hit for me when he asked her if she told her parents he was black. And I have been introduced in rural Oregon as not only the first black person someone's dated, but the first female assigned black person someone's dated. Ooh. And literally had someone be like, I don't know why my parents don't like you. And I'm like, really? I can give you a whole list. You know?
So they can too.
Yeah, I think they know.
They so know. They really know why they don't like me. You know, and just her lack of understanding of his fear, and her lack of not realizing there was a danger. The fact that people thought his friend was the comic relief when he was the only person with any sense, you know, that was what was hitting me, you know, like when he was like, oh, you don't want to be with a black person in the woods, and I was in that white theater, I'm like, why would he be scared? I literally heard someone say like, oh, why would you be scared of that?
I definitely had like this Jeepers Creepers vibe of watching the first scene, also of being like it totally reminded me of the song from Jeepers Creepers, like that vibe. And like, do white people, when they hear a car playing 1940s music, do they have like a wholesome feeling like this person isn't going to hurt me? Because absolutely, when I hear that, I'm like, this person has hoods in their car. This person, you know,
that like weird.
So that very chilling of like,
that song is so important, because that is like
it's true.
Shit.
It's like, how do I roll in a ditch and hide my wheelchair under shrubs? Like,
that song and that sound. I hadn't even thought about that. So some white people probably wasn't even insidious, but the first chord of that Run Rabbit Run song came on, and I was like, I have to go. This is too much. Such a good film.
I love it. I love it.
Go see it.
It's so good.
It's so important.
It's very upsetting, but it's really good.
Beautiful and good. If you like The Shining, if you like Cabin in the Woods, if you're into horror that's actually trying to say something, if you like The Babadook, go see Get Out.
And I encourage all white people to pay attention to when you feel encouraged to laugh and when other people gasp.
Yeah.
Just try playing the quiet game as a white person in the audience. And I love Jordan Peele so
much.
Yeah,
thank you, Jordan Peele. All right, y'all. Thanks for coming through. This has been The Roundtable on Death Space Magazine. Bye. See you next time.